Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I used to love solo camping. The isolation, the quiet, the escape from the chaos of city life. It was my therapy. Some people drink, some go to therapy. I packed a tent, drove out into the deep woods, and let the silence do its work. That changed after last summer. I had picked a spot deep in the forests of Washington State, far from any trails or campsites. I was the only soul out there, just the way I liked it. The air smelled fresh, pine and damp earth, and the only sounds were the occasional distant cry of an owl and the crackling of my fire. It was perfect, at least until midnight. That was when the quiet changed. Not just the usual late-night stillness. This was different. The wind had been whispering through the trees earlier, rustling the leaves, making the forest feel alive. But now, dead silence. No wind, no insects, no shifting branches. It felt like the whole forest was holding its breath. I remember sitting by the fire, my instant noodles half eaten in my lap, staring into the trees and feeling this weight. Like something was there, just beyond the reach of the firelight, watching. And then I saw him. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Just a shape, a shadow among the trees. But no, he was real. A man, standing about 30 feet away, just beyond the glow of my fire. He wasn't moving, wasn't speaking, just standing there, watching me. I tried to tell myself it was a hiker, maybe a lost camper who had spotted my fire. But something about him was wrong. He wasn't holding a flashlight, wasn't carrying a backpack, just standing barefoot in the dirt, motionless. I should have said something, should have called out, asked if he was okay. But my throat felt tight, like my body already knew something my mind refused to accept. I blinked. He was still there. I swallowed hard and reached for my flashlight, forcing my fingers to close around it. My hand was shaking. I didn't look away for more than a second, but when I flicked on the beam and aimed it toward him, he was gone. Not like he had stepped back into the darkness. Just gone. My whole body went cold. The kind of deep, primal cold that settles in your bones when something is terribly, horribly wrong. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with my back to my tent, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other. Every so often, I would shine the light into the trees, half expecting to see him again. But I never did. Still, I felt him. You ever get the sense that someone is standing behind you, just out of sight? That was how the entire night felt. I kept picturing him there, just beyond the trees, watching, waiting. By the time the first streaks of dawn touched the sky, I had already packed most of my gear. I didn't eat, didn't even bother dousing the fire properly. I just wanted to get the hell out of there. But as I was about to step away from my campsite, something caught my eye. A footprint. Just one. Barefoot. Deep. Fresh. My breath hitched as I realized something even worse. The footprint wasn't facing my campsite. It was facing away, like he had been standing there for hours, watching me, and then just turned and walked back into the trees. I don't go camping anymore. Story 2. We should have left when we had the chance, but we didn't. And now, I don't think I'll ever sleep peacefully again. It started as a simple camping trip. Me, my brother Kyle, and our two friends, James and Eric. We wanted somewhere remote, far from tourists and families with screaming kids. A place where the only sounds are the crackling fire and the occasional hoot of an owl. We found it in Deadwood Hollow. The lake was untouched, the trees stretched high into the sky, and best of all, no one else was around. The ranger at the last station gave us a weird look when we asked about the area, but all he said was, "Not many folks camp out there." We should have taken a hint. The first night was perfect. We drank, we told stories, and we watched the fire dance against the dark. The kind of night that makes you forget the world outside exists. The second night was when it all went wrong. I woke up to a sound that didn't belong. Crying. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I realized it was real, soft, distant sobbing drifting through the trees. Kyle shifted in his sleeping bag. "Do you hear that?" "Yeah," I whispered. We unzipped our tent slightly, just enough to peek outside. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the camp. Across from us, James and Eric's tent was still. Then the crying got closer. What had started as a soft whimper was now full-blown, gasping sobs, like a lost child, barely able to catch their breath. "Did someone bring their kid?" Kyle muttered, half joking, but I could hear the tension in his voice. I wanted to say it was a lost hiker, a kid who wandered too far, but deep down, something felt wrong. The crying stopped. Silence swallowed the forest whole. No wind, no leaves rustling, no crickets. Then a voice, right outside our tent. "Help me." My stomach clenched. It wasn't the voice of a child. Not really. It was trying to be, but something about it was off. Too hollow, too stretched, like an adult forcing their voice high and thin. Kyle clutched my arm. I could feel his nails digging into my skin. None of us moved. The voice came again. "Please, help me." Then footsteps. Slow, heavy, circling our tents. I stopped breathing. The weight of each step pressed against the earth, deliberate and unhurried. Whatever was out there wanted us to hear it. James's tent unzipped with a quick zzz. A beam of light from his flashlight cut through the trees. Nothing. No footprints. No movement. Just empty space where someone should have been standing. "Dude, what the hell was that?" Eric's voice was barely above a whisper. No one answered. We sat there in silence for the rest of the night, huddled in our tents, waiting for the footsteps to return. They never did. At first light, we packed up and left. None of us spoke a word about what had happened. We just wanted to be out of those woods. On the way home, we stopped at a small gas station in town. The attendant was an old man, weathered and gray, sitting behind the counter. He had our gear as we walked in. "Where you boys been camping?" James, still shaken, muttered, "Deadwood Hollow." The old man went pale. His hand tightened around the counter. "You shouldn't have gone out there." Kyle frowned. "Why?" The man hesitated, then sighed. 30 years ago, a man and his son went camping in those woods. The boy got lost. The father searched for 3 days straight. On the 4th, they found him. Was he alive? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The old man shook his head. "No, they found the father, hanging from a tree." My throat tightened. "And the kid?" "Never found." His voice was low, like he didn't want the words leaving his lips. "Some folks say he's still out there, calling for help, but it ain't really him anymore." A cold shiver crawled on my spine. We drove home in silence. None of us ever went camping again. Story 3. Last fall, I took Emily on her first camping trip. She had been excited about it for weeks, buying gear, watching survival videos, even practicing tying knots in our apartment. She loved the idea of getting away from the city, away from work stress, away from people. I should have known better. We drove deep into the mountains, past the usual campsites, beyond the marked trails, until we found a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. The air was crisp and the silence was heavy. The perfect spot. By nightfall, we had the tent set up and a fire crackling. We roasted marshmallows, talked about nothing, let the flames hypnotize us. It was peaceful, until it wasn't. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. A flicker of orange in the distance, barely visible through the trees. Another campfire. Strange. We hadn't seen a single car or hiker all day. No footprints. No signs of anyone else being out here. And yet, about 200 feet away, through the dense tree line, a fire burned. I felt a chill, not from the cold, but from something deeper, something instinctual. Emily noticed it too. She stopped mid-sentence, staring past me, her face drained of color. "They're watching us," she whispered. I turned. Figures. 5, maybe 6, standing near the distant fire. Just silhouettes, tall and motionless, like mannequins left out in the woods. No talking, no movement, just standing there, watching. I forced a chuckle, try and play it off. "Probably just other campers," I said. Emily didn't respond. The firelight should have flickered, should have danced against their bodies. But it didn't. Their shadows were sharp, perfect, like paper cutouts. And the fire itself, it was too still. No shifting embers, no rise and fall of flames. Just a steady, unnatural glow. Emily grabbed my arm. "Let's go. Now." I hesitated. It was probably just a weird optical illusion, right? Maybe hikers using some kind of lantern. Maybe a group of weirdos who didn't want to say hello. Then, one of the figures moved. Not a step, not a shift, just closer. I blinked. Another was closer too. They hadn't walked, hadn't crossed the space between. They were just suddenly there. Emily yanked at my sleeve, her breath coming fast and shallow. That was enough for me. We packed up in 5 minutes, shoving everything into the truck without bothering to fold it properly. The whole time, I kept my eyes on the figures. They never got closer, never moved again, but they were still watching. And then, as I slammed the truck door shut, the fire vanished. Not like someone had put it out. No smoke, no glowing embers. Just gone. The figures? Gone too. Like they had never been there. We drove. Fast. Faster than we should have on those winding mountain roads. But I didn't care. I just needed to get away. The feeling in my gut wasn't fear. It was worse. It was like something had been wrong with that place on a level I couldn't explain. Emily wouldn't stop shaking. She kept glancing out the window like she expected to see those figures standing on the side of the road. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting the fire to be following us, flickering in the distance. We drove until we hit a small roadside motel, the kind with flickering neon signs and a guy at the desk who looked half asleep. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Emily. Around 3 a.m., curiosity got the best of me. I pulled out my phone, hoping I had captured something, proof that I hadn't imagined it. I had taken one picture. It showed our campsite, but where the other fire should have been, there was nothing. Just darkness. Not empty space. Not trees. Just pure, inky blackness, like a hole had been punched through the world. Emily refuses to go camping ever again. And honestly, so do I.